everyone. I was thinking that for Around the World week, you might like to travel back with me to New York so we can finish our story, Percy Jackson and the Stolen Chariot. It's written by Rick Riordan and published by Puffin Books at Penguin Random House. If you haven't seen the first part of the story, have a look through the Larwood School channel and find the first half. It was a few weeks ago now. And I hope you can remember where we got to so far, okay? So we're with Percy and Clarice and we're in New York. Okay. We took the subway, keeping a lookout for more attacks, but no one bothered us. As we rode, Clarice told me about Phobos and Deimos. They're minor gods, she said. Phobos is fear, Deimos is terror. What's the difference? She frowned. Deimos is bigger and uglier, I guess? He's good at freaking out entire crowds. Phobos is more like personal. He can get inside your head. That's where they get the word phobia. Yeah, she grumbled. He's so proud of that. All those phobias named after him. The jerk. So why don't they want you driving the chariot? It's usually a ritual just for Aries' sons when they turn 15. I'm the first daughter to get a shot in a long time. Good for you. Tell that to Phobos and Deimos. They hate me. I've got to get the chariot back to the temple. Where is the temple? Pier 86, the Intrepid. Oh, it made sense now that I thought about it. I'd never actually been on board the old aircraft carrier, but I knew they used it as some kind of military museum. It probably had a bunch of guns and bombs and other dangerous toys. Just the kind of place a war god would want to hang out. We've got maybe 4 hours before sunset, I guessed. That should be enough time if we find the chariot. What did Phobos mean, over the water? We're on an island for Zeus's sake. That could be any direction. He said something about wild animals, I remembered. Little wild animals. A zoo? I nodded. A zoo over the water could be the one in Brooklyn. Or maybe someplace harder to get to with little wild animals. Someplace nobody would ever think to look for a war chariot. Staten Island, I said. They've got a small zoo. Maybe, Clarice said. That sounds like the kind of out-of-way place Phobos and Deimos would stash something. But if we're wrong, we don't have time to be wrong. We hopped off the train at Times Square and caught the number 1 line downtown towards the ferry terminal. We boarded the Staten Island ferry at 3:30, along with a bunch of tourists who crowded the railings at the top deck, snapping pictures as we passed the Statue of Liberty. He modelled that on his mum, I said, looking up at the statue. Clarice frowned at me. Who? Bartholdi, I said. The dude who made the Statue of Liberty. He was a son of Athena. And he designed it to like his mum. That's what Annabeth told me anyway. Clarice rolled her eyes. Annabeth was my best friend and a huge nut when it came to architecture and monuments. I guessed her egghead facts rubbed off on me sometimes. Useless, Clarice said. If it doesn't help you fight, it's useless information. I could have argued with her, but just then the ferry lurched like it had hit a rock. Tourists spilled forward, tumbling into each other. Clarice and I ran out to the front of the boat. The water below us started to boil. Then the head of a sea serpent erupted from the bay. The monster was at least as big as the boat. It was grey and green, with a head like a crocodile and razor-sharp teeth. It smelled, well, like something that had just come up from the bottom of New York Harbour. Riding on its neck was a bulky guy in black Greek armour. His face was covered with ugly scars, and he held a javelin in his hand. Deimos, Clarice yelled. Hello, sister. His smile was almost as horrible as the serpent's. Care to play? The monster roared. Tourists screamed and scattered. I don't know exactly what they saw. The mist usually prevented mortals from seeing monsters in their true form, but whatever they saw, they were terrified. Leave them alone, I yelled. Or what, son of the sea god? Deimos sneered. My brother tells me you're a wimp. Besides, I love terror. I live on terror. He spurred the sea serpent into head-butting the ferry, which sloshed backwards. Alarms blared. Passengers fell over each other trying to get away. Deimos laughed with delight. That's it, I grumbled. Clarice, grab on. What? Grab onto my neck. We're going for a ride. She didn't protest. She jumped onto me, and I said, 1, 2, 3, jump! We leaped off the top deck and straight into the bay, but we were only underwater for a moment. I felt the power of the ocean surging through me. I willed the water to swirl around, building force until we burst out of the bay on top of a 10-metre high water spout. I steered us straight towards the monster. You think you can tackle Deimos? I yelled to Clarice. I'm on it, she said. Just get me within 3 metres. We barreled towards the serpent. Just as it bared its fangs, I swerved the waterspout to one side and Clarice jumped. She crashed into Deimos and both of them toppled into the sea. The sea serpent came after me. I quickly turned the waterspout to face him, then summoned all my power and willed the water to even greater heights. Whoom! 50,000 litres of salt water crashed into the monster. I leaped over its head, uncapped riptide, and slashed with all my might at the creature's neck. The monster roared. Green blood spouted from the wound, and the serpent sank beneath the waves. I dived underwater and watched as it retreated to the open sea. That's one good thing about sea serpents. They're big babies when it comes to getting hurt. Clarice surfaced near me, spluttering and coughing. I swam over and grabbed her. Did you get Deimos? I asked. Clarice shook her head. The coward disappeared as we were wrestling, but I'm sure we'll see him again. Phobos too. Tourists were still running around the ferry in a panic, but it didn't look like anyone was hurt. The boat didn't seem damaged. I decided we shouldn't stick around. I held onto Clarice's arm and willed the waves to carry us towards Staten Island. In the west, the sun was going down over the Jersey shore. We were running out of time. I'd never spent much time on Staten Island, and I found it was a lot bigger than I thought and not much fun to walk. The streets curved around confusingly and everything seemed to be uphill. I was dry. I never got wet in the ocean unless I wanted to, but Clarice's clothes were still sopping wet, so she left mucky footprints all over the sidewalk, and the bus driver wouldn't let us on the bus. We'll never make it in time, she sighed. Stop thinking that way. I tried to sound upbeat, but I was starting to have doubts too. I wished we had reinforcements. 2 demigods against 2 minor gods was not an even match, and when we met Phobos and Deimos together, I wasn't sure what we were going to do. I kept remembering what Phobos had said. How about you, Percy Jackson? What do you fear? I'll find out, you know. After dragging ourselves halfway down the island, past a lot of suburban houses, a couple of churches and a McDonald's, we finally saw a sign that said Zoo. We turned a corner and followed this curvy street with some woods on one side until we came to the entrance. The lady at the ticket booth looked at us suspiciously, but thank the gods I had enough cash to get us inside. We walked around the reptile house and Clarice stopped in her tracks. There he is. It was sitting at a crossroads between the petting zoo and the sea otter pond. A large golden and red chariot tethered to 4 black horses. The chariot was decorated with amazing detail. It would have been beautiful if all the pictures hadn't shown people dying painful deaths. The horses were breathing fire out of their nostrils. Families with buggies walked right past the chariot like it didn't exist. I guess the mist must have been really strong around it, because the chariot's only camouflage was a handwritten note taped to one of the horses' chests that said, Official Zoo Vehicle. Where are Phobos and Deimos? Clarice muttered, drawing her sword. I couldn't see them anywhere, but this had to be a trap. I concentrated on the horses. Usually I could talk to horses since my dad created them. I said, Hey, nice fire-breathing horses, come here. One of the horses whinnied disdainfully. I could understand his thoughts all right. He called me some names I can't repeat. I'll try and get the reins, Clarice said. The horses know me. Cover me. Right. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to cover her with a sword, but I kept my eyes peeled as Clarice approached the chariot. She walked around the horses, almost tiptoeing. She froze as a lady with a 3-year-old girl passed by. The girl said, Pony on fire! Don't be silly, Jessie, the mother said in a dazed voice. That's an official zoo vehicle. The little girl tried to protest, but her mother grabbed her hand and they kept walking. Clarice got closer to the chariot. Her hand had almost reached the rail when the horses reared up, whinnying and breathing flames. Phobos and Deimos appeared in the chariot, both of them now dressed in pitch-black battle armour. Phobos grinned, his red eyes glowing. Deimos' scarred face looked even more horrible up close. "The hunt is on," Phobos yelled. Clarice stumbled back as he lashed the horses and charged the chariot straight towards me. Now, I'd like to tell you I did something heroic, like stand up against a raging team of fire-breathing horses with only my sword. The truth is, I ran. I jumped over a trash can and an exhibit fence, but there was no way I could outrun the chariot. It crashed through the fence right behind me, ploughing down everything in its path. "Percy, look out!" Clarice yelled, like I needed somebody to tell me that. I jumped and landed on a rock island in the middle of the otter exhibit. I wheeled a column of water out of the pond and doused the horses, temporarily extinguishing their flames and sending them into confusion. The otters weren't happy with me. They chattered and barked, and I figured I'd better get off their island quick before I had crazed sea mammals after me too. I ran as Phobos cursed and tried to get his horses under control. Clarice took the opportunity to jump on Deimos' back just as he was lifting his javelin. Both of them went tumbling out of the chariot as it lurched forward. I could hear Deimos and Clarice starting to fight, sword on sword, but I didn't have time to worry about it because Phobos was riding after me again. I sprinted towards the aquarium with the chariot right behind me. "Hey Percy," Phobos taunted, "I've got something for you." I glanced back and saw the chariot melting, the horses turning to steel and folding into each other like clay figures being crumpled. The chariot refashioned itself into a black metal box with caterpillar tracks, a turret, and a long gun barrel. A tank. I recognised it from this research report I'd had to do for history class. Phobos was grinning at me from the top of a World War II Panzer. "Say cheese," he said. I rolled to one side as the gun fired. Kaboom! A souvenir kiosk exploded, sending fuzzy animals and plastic cups and disposable cameras in every direction. As Phobos re-aimed his gun, I got to my feet and dived into the aquarium. I wanted to surround myself with water. That always increased my power. Besides, it was possible Phobos couldn't fit the chariot through the doorway. Of course, if he blasted through it, that wouldn't help. I ran through the rooms, washed in weird blue light from the fish tank exhibits. Cuttlefish, clownfish, and eels all stared at me as I raced past. I could hear their little minds whispering, "Son of the sea god! Son of the sea god!" It's great when you're a celebrity to squids. I stopped at the back of the aquarium and listened. I heard nothing. Then, vroom, vroom, a different kind of engine. I watched in disbelief as Phobos came riding through the aquarium on a Harley-Davidson. I'd seen this motorcycle before, its black flame-decorated engine, its shotgun holsters, its leather seat that looked like human skin. This was the same motorcycle Ares had ridden when I'd first met him. But it had never occurred to me that it was just another form of his war chariot. "Hello, loser," Phobos said, pulling a huge sword out of its sheath. "Time to be scared." I raised my own sword, determined to face him, but then Phobos' eyes glowed brighter, and I made the mistake of looking into them. Suddenly, I was in a different place. I was at Camp HalfBlood, my favourite place in the world, and it was in flames. The woods were on fire, the cabins were smoking, the dining pavilion's Greek columns had crumbled, and the big house was a smouldering ruin. My friends were on their knees pleading with me, Annabeth, Grover, and all the other campers. "Save us, Percy," they wailed. "Make the choice." I stood paralysed. This was the moment I'd always dreaded, the prophecy that was supposed to come about when I was 16. I would make a choice that would save or destroy Mount Olympus. Now, the moment was here. I had no idea what to do. The camp was burning. My friends looked at me, begging for help. My heart pounded. I couldn't move. What if I did the wrong thing? Then I heard the voices of the aquarium fish. "Son of the sea god, wake!" Suddenly I felt the power of the ocean all around me again. Hundreds of litres of salt water, thousands of fish trying to get my attention. I wasn't at camp. This was an illusion. Phobos was showing me my deepest fear. I blinked and saw Phobos' blade coming down towards my head. I raised Riptide and blocked the blow just before it cut me in two. I counterattacked and stabbed Phobos in the arm. Golden ichor, the blood of the gods, soaked through his shirt. Phobos growled and slashed at me. I parried easily. Without his power of fear, Phobos was nothing. He wasn't even a decent fighter. I pressed him back, swiped at his face and gave him a cut across the cheek. The angrier he was, the clumsier he got. I couldn't kill him, he was immortal, but you wouldn't have known that from his expression. The fear god looked afraid. Finally, I kicked him backwards towards the water fountain. His sword skittered into the ladies' room. I grabbed the straps of his armour and pulled him up to face me. You're going to disappear now, I told him. You're going to stay out of Clarice's way, and if I see you again, I'm going to give you a bigger scar in a much more painful place. He gulped. There will be a next time, Jackson. And he dissolved into yellow vapour. He turned towards the fish exhibits. Thanks, guys. I turned towards the fish exhibits. Thanks, guys. Then I looked at Ares' motorcycle. I'd never ridden an all-powerful Harley-Davidson war chariot before, but how hard could it be? I hopped on, started the ignition, and rode out of the aquarium to help Clarice. I had no trouble finding her. I just followed the path of destruction. Fences were knocked down, animals were running free, badgers and lemurs were checking out the popcorn machine. Fat-looking leopard was lounging on a park bench with a bunch of pigeon feathers around him. I parked the motorcycle next to the petting zoo, and there were Deimos and Clarice in the goat area. Clarice was on her knees. I ran forward, but stopped suddenly when I saw how Deimos had changed form. He was Ares now, the tall god of war, dressed in black leather and sunglasses, his whole body smoking with anger as he raised his fist over Clarice. You failed me again, the war god bellowed. I told you what would happen. He tried to strike her, but Clarice scrambled away, shrieking, No, please! Foolish girl! Clarice, I yelled. It's an illusion! Stand up to him! Deimos' form flickered. I am Ares, he insisted. And you are a worthless girl. I knew you would fail me. Now you will suffer my wrath. I wanted to charge in and fight Deimos, but somehow I knew it wouldn't help. Clarice had to do it. This was her worst fear. She had to overcome it for herself. Clarice, I said. She glanced over. I tried to hold her eyes. Stand up to him, I said. He's all talk. Get up. I can't. Yes, you can. You're a warrior. Get up. She hesitated. Then she began to stand. What are you doing? Ares bellowed. Grovel for mercy, girl. Clarice took a shaky breath. Very quietly, she said, No. What? She raised her sword. I'm tired of being scared of you. Deimos struck, but Clarice deflected the blow. She staggered, but didn't fall. You're not Ares, Clarice said. You're not even a good fighter. Deimos growled in frustration. Then he struck again, but Clarice was ready. She disarmed him and stabbed him in the shoulder. Not deep, but enough to hurt even a godling. He yowled in pain and began to glow. Look away, I told Clarice. We averted our eyes as Deimos exploded into golden light, his true godly form, and disappeared. We were alone except for the petting zoo goats, which were tugging at our clothes looking for snacks. The motorcycle had turned back into a horse-drawn chariot. Clarice looked at me cautiously. She wiped the straw and sweat off her face. You didn't see that. You didn't see any of it. I grinned. You were great. She glanced at the sky, which was turning red behind the trees. Get in the chariot, Clarice said. We've still got a long ride to make. A few minutes later, we reached the Staten Island ferry and remembered something obvious. We were on an island. The ferry didn't take cars, or chariots, or motorcycles. Great, Clarice mumbled. What do we do now? Ride this thing across the Verrazano Bridge? We both knew there wasn't time. There were bridges to Brooklyn and New Jersey, but either way it would take hours to drive the chariot back to Manhattan, even if we could fool people into thinking it was a regular car. Then I got an idea. We'll take the direct route. Clarice frowned. What do you mean? I closed my eyes and began to concentrate. Drive straight ahead. Go. Clarice was so desperate she didn't hesitate. She yelled, Hi-ya! And lashed the horses. They charged straight towards the water. I imagined the sea turning solid, the waves becoming a firm surface all the way to Manhattan. The war chariot hit the surf, and the horses' fiery breath smoking all around us. We rode to the tops of the waves, straight across New York Harbour. We arrived at Pier 86 just as the sunset was fading to purple. The USS Intrepid, Temple of Ares, was a huge wall of grey metal in front of us. The flight deck dotted with fighter aircraft and helicopters. We parked the chariot on the ramp and I jumped out. For once I was glad to be on dry land. Concentrating on keeping the chariot above the water had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I was exhausted. "I better get out of here before Ares arrived," I said. Clarice nodded. "He'd probably kill you on sight." "Congratulations," I said. "I guess you passed your driving test." She wrapped the reins around her hand. "About what you saw, Percy. What I was afraid of, I mean." "I won't tell anybody." She looked at me uncomfortably. "Did Phobos scare you?" "Yeah. I saw the camp in flames. I saw my friends all pleading for my help, and I didn't know what to do. For a second I couldn't move. I was paralysed." "I know how you felt." She lowered her eyes. I guess I should say," the words seemed to stick in her throat, "I wasn't sure Clarice had ever said thank you in her life." "Don't mention it," I told her. I started to work out, but she called out, "Percy?" "Yeah?" "When you had that vision of your friends—" "You were one of them," I promised. "Just don't tell anybody, okay? I'll have to kill you." A faint smile flickered across her face. "See you later." "See you." I headed off towards the subway. It had been a long day, and I was ready to go home. I hope you enjoyed the story. Stay safe, be good, and I'll see you soon.